So DevNet Expert is a track that we started like about about a half a year ago. We launched the exam, and it was something that we envisioned to offer already for a long time. If you remember, we announced like DevNet Professional, DevNet Associate somewhere in early 2020, and we all know what happened afterwards. So it gave us some time to build this DevNet Expert exam. So it's all based on that network automation engineer that's gonna automate your network, do programmability in your network, and work in a professional way with network automation. So what we built this exam on is a software development lifecycle, as you can see here. So each exam will test on design, develop, test, maintain in the software development lifecycle. So that's what we try to test. So the exam topics for DevNet Expert, 5 big domains. First is software design, development, and deployment. And this is really about how are you going to design software solutions, keeping into account high availability, resiliency, performance, all these kind of things. This domain can also include, for example, how you migrate an existing software solutions into a new software solution. Using Git, for example, is also in here. Troubleshooting issues with CI/CD pipelines. So that's domain 1. Domain 2 is really all about infrastructure as code. So what you will see here is how to use code to automate your infrastructure. And what you can think is things like a lot of API interaction. For example, writing Python code in order to write an app that simulates a CLI, things like that. Or automate against an API that you've never seen. So on the exam, we could present you with an API that hasn't been published, but we give you the documentation, and based on that documentation, you then need to automate against it. So it's to see and to check how good you are in taking that documentation and translating it into requirements. Other things in this domain are, for example, Ansible, Terraform, NSO. So those things are covered here as well. Next, we have network programmability and automation. This is all about programming the network. And then I think about things like iOS XE devices, how to automate configurations, how to automate network protocol configuration on an iOS XE device, for example. Does it mean that you need to be very proficient in networking as well? It's not really the case. It's helpful if you have some prior knowledge on networking. And if you have, for example, a CCNP or networking or a CCNP enterprise infrastructure, security, those things will help. Is it a requirement? Not really. If you're good in networking and you are really skilled in software development as well, then you should be able to complete most of the tasks in this domain. What else is included? For example, Yang. So that's one of the topics in this domain as well. Containers, I think that speaks a bit for itself. It's like Docker, Kubernetes, these kind of things. Only 10%. So the numbers you see next to the blueprint are the weights on how big they are on the exam. So for example, domain 1 is 20%, domain 2, 30, and so on. And last but not least, we have security. We made this a separate domain in the blueprint because we wanted to highlight that securing your network, securing your software solution is really important. And this includes things like leveraging the OWASP framework for your software solution. And we really define what you need to know. So it's really detailed. It's not like you have to know everything about OWASP. It's like really detailed in the subtasks. So what does that include? So this is an example of a domain worked out. So what you see here is the main level, so the domain level. This is a task level, and this is a subtask level. And that's how all of our blueprints work. So you have a main domain to which we map that domain weight. So on the exam, you will definitely see 20% of this domain. Does it mean that it covers everything? Not really. It could be that on an exam form 1, you get like 3 tasks in this domain, but not on 1.2, for example. In the other form of the exam, form 2, for example, it could be that 1.3 is missing and we test you on the other ones. But overall, this domain will always have 20%, right? So what is the exam format? If you want to do your DevNet Expert and any other expert certification, by the way, you get 2 modules. There's one module at the beginning of the exam, which is a design module, where we test you on designing those software solutions. And we have another module, module 2, which is a DTDM module, which are the other parts of that software development lifecycle. So design module, 3 hours fixed. It's all web-based. Backward navigation is enabled. Point values are hidden, and the skills we test is plan and design. So you could kind of think of this like, I would say, a written style exam. But I will give you an example later on so that you can see the difference is what a written style exam is in NA and NP and what it means for our expert exams. So it's a totally different game here. If we test you on design in an expert level way, we're going to ask you to take decisions based on resources that we give you. And you'll see that in an example. So for that design module, what you have to keep in mind is that the question that you see is going to be a question with, for example, 4 or 5 options. And if you read the question, each of those options could be right. If you don't read the resources that come with that question, each of those options could be a valid solution to the question we ask. It's only when you start reading into those different options that you see into the resources that you can find clues on which one is the correct option. So we'll see that in a later way, in a later example. So you have to consider like the whole story and background information available to you in that question. So one thing that's also important to note is that for design items on an expert exam, you could get like partial credit. So for example, if it's a question of 4 points, a big question, you could get like 2 points if you have it partially correct, and another 2 points if you have totally correct makes up 4 points, right? So design is one part. It's a storyline, it's a topology, it's like a software solution that already exists. The DTDM part is like the practical part. And those 2 parts are related to each other, but it doesn't mean that the decisions that you took in the design part, that you also have to implement them in the DTDM part. So it's the same topology, same like story, but it's a different approach in the DTDM as opposed to the design. Really important, and I can see it almost drops off here. Pay attention to the context. So the context of what you're working in is really important. If you compare it to associate or professional level, you mostly get questions where there's only one good answer. Here it all depends on the context. So the design module, it's a 3-hour session in the morning, about 30 items roughly. So you can calculate the time you can take for an item. If you take 6 minutes, as a general rule per item, you should be okay. You can watch the time on your watch or the workstation to like time how much time you use for an item. And don't lose too much time on one item when you're looking into it, because there are so many items on the design part, you always have like new scoring opportunities. So let's see an example. So this is an example of a question that we could present you with on the DevNet Expert exam. And as you can see, it says, which approach do you suggest the automation team to take to ease management of access control lists? And we have 4 options. Create a Python tool using the Click library with commands to manage the ACLs. Share Postman collection of RESTConf API requests to manage the device ACLs. Build an Ansible role that can be used to manage these ACLs. And also create an NSO service. So as you can see, all of these options, if you read a question like that, it could make sense, right? So yeah, which one to pick? And that's where we are going to give you that those resources, that other information that you need in order to answer this question. So this is the first email, for example. You get an email from Director of IT. Hey, expert, so we call you an expert already, so we give you the benefit of the doubt. The new processes implemented by the architecture and operations team to make changes to external access lists at the request of security have resulted in missing our SLA with partners 4 times this week alone. Not to mention barely catching serious configuration errors at the last time. Please sync up with the ops lead and come up with a permanent solution for this issue. So you can see something has happened. Someone has implemented some kind of a solution to manage access lists, and it isn't working. So because you're missing SLA, probably they're making mistakes and creating like outages with partners. So Director of IT asks you, can you pick this up with the ops lead? So that's the next resource. You're picking it up with the ops lead. And of course, the ops lead is like, hey, it's not that bad, right? He's like very chilled out. He doesn't really see the big issue here. So it's not that bad. The process has only been in place for 3 weeks. My team is doing a great job. That's what all ops lead would say, right? I understand, but after 3 weeks, you must have ideas for improving. And then true, the problem is creating. So this is like a chat transcript between yourself and that ops lead. And the things you provide them is, what if we could standardize the flow, the workflow, common inputs, fill in the blanks. So that would actually help a lot. Tools your team has given us in the past has already helped us gratefully. So then you get like an email from the network architect. Expert, as per stand-up call this morning, here are the details about the network devices that are in scope for new access list policies and solutions. So what does he say? Most of our standard deployment of our ASR routers using iOS XE. However, this new standard is still being implemented. There is still 50% of locations that need to be updated, and those sites have a variety of router platforms. So multiple vendors, some are older than 10 years, and we won't complete the refresh for 12 months. And I confirmed that netconf and restconf is now the standard in all deployments. So you can see this is already a good view of what is in the network. So what devices are we dealing with? It's like a combination of new devices, old devices that you need to manage those access lists on. So this is like accompanying information. And then you have a chat with the service desk developer. And from this chat, you should see who the main stakeholder of this issue is. So what does he say? We have just finished the development and testing of new workflows to approve the ACL request in the service desk system. So the main stakeholder you're trying to help here is this service desk developer. And that's what you need to pick up from these conversations. Who's the main stakeholder? What are the devices you need to manage? What is the general flow of all of the resources that you have to work with? So that's great news. So once the request is in, what happens? It is routed to the operations team. They execute the work. So basically, the service desk developer creates like a template, for example, and the operations teams just executes the work. So does the user request include all the source and destination details? Yeah, and the workflow could continue after approval, but the ops lead told us each request is too unique. So if you read this again, does it make more sense now? So option 1, create a Python tool using the click library with commands to manage the ACLs. Could still be done, but for a service desk developer, that's maybe a little bit too difficult. So I wouldn't choose that one. The second one, share a Postman collection of REST API requests to manage the device ACLs. Yeah, maybe, but the thing is, REST API, all of these old devices could have different APIs to work with, so it could be cumbersome. So also this one, maybe not the best option. Build an Ansible role. We're all Ansible lovers, I think. Also, an option that can be used, but let's say you have an issue with your Ansible playbook. It's doing the changes, and all of a sudden it stops because there's an issue. There's issues with rollback for service desk developers, maybe also not the best. So create an NSO service in this case would be the best option to choose because it provides the user with a modern tool and good API interaction. So that in this case. So this is an example of how you would take all the information and like come to a conclusion on which option could be the best here. DTDM is more about like doing the hands-on, doing the configuration, doing all the automation and the Python scripting. Does this mean that you have to start like coding from scratch? Not at all. During the exam, you will have pre-existing configurations and coding scripts that you have to modify. So we will ask you to take those scripts, those Python scripts, and just modify them in order to solve the issue. So read all that is expected. The thing in the DTDM module is that if you have an item, there's no partial scoring. So that means that if the item has like 3 or 4 bullet points and you miss one of them, you will fail that item. So that's the dynamic of DTDM question. So points are awarded per task if the solution meets all the requirements. If one requirement is missed, then you fail. So you need to pay attention to each of those requirements. And there may be many valid solutions. So it could be that you solved an issue in a different way than we solved it. But if that is a valid solution, and if it keeps all the requirements and constraints in mind, you should pass the item. So we have automated scripts. We do not look at your coding. We really look at the outcome of your coding, right? So really important in DTDM is that you manage your time. So don't get stuck on items. And the advantage of the DevNet Expert exam is that our items, you can like cherry pick items. You can first do the items that you're really good at, technologies that you're really good at, and then take on the bigger items that you have difficulties with. Also, don't lose time on an item. I would say if you don't have like a clue of how to solve something in 5 minutes after reading the question, just go on to the next question and try to solve that. If you're able to solve the next question, it could be that you're building some confidence. And when you come back to that item, that you see like the bigger picture in that one. Yeah, keep a note. So we have ways of keeping a note on the different tasks. You can like click a star and then it will pop up and you will see like, okay, I still need to do that item. And even use a prohibited solution if needed. So it could be that if you use a prohibited solution, that you will find a clue on how to solve it anyway. And the last one is troubleshoot before asking the proctor for help. The proctor is going to try to help you, but he's not going to give you clues on how to solve something. So this is an example of a DTDM question. So you're moving away from manually provisioning your ACI fabrics and are starting our infrastructure as code journey to ACI Ansible. You're tasked to complete your Ansible playbook so that it correctly deploys an ACI fabric. So on completion, the playbook must do the following. You need to create tenants, application profiles, EPGs. And you might say, hey, I don't really know ACI and I don't know how it works. So we will provide you with all of that documentation in order to be able to do this. On our DevNet Expert exam, we have the documentation available, and we also have like a search engine. So as opposed to a CCIE exam, you have to go and look up your documentation manually. You have to navigate through the interface. We do have like a kind of a search engine. It's not Google, but at least if you type in ACI, you will get the ACI documentation. Authenticate using key-based authentication, and for each ACI object created, attach the description in the format created by Ansible, where the date is the output of the Linux date command. Make sure to use all variables from the supplied inventory.yaml file, and make sure your code is reusable. So what we mean by that is often we give you like an inventory.yaml file, which you can use for your variables. Now, if you don't use that, and if you like hard code those variables, you will fail, because what we try to achieve is that we can take, like, for example, an other inventory file, run it again with your code, and it should work as well. So basically, after an exam, we tear down the whole thing. We have your code saved in a Git environment. We run it again on a different platform, on a different topology maybe, and it should still give the same outcome, right? And upon completion, you should validate the playbook. So we also give you the way on how to validate your solution. So if you look at it like this, you have the context, which in DTDM is most of the time short. You have the instructions, which are the bulleted things, and you have the constraints. So this is just a small constraint. Sometimes you have like a list of constraints of things you cannot do, but it will all be documented in the question. And at the end, you have the validation task. So this is example question of DTDM. So if I poked your interest in DevNet Expert and you're planning to do it and you took your exam, well, this is maybe a small script that you can run after the exam when you're waiting to get the results. All right, that was it. Thank you. Yeah, so we still have our gift. Someone is getting the numbers. So you have a good chance, not too many people here. Yes. Do you mean like how much do you need to get? We don't disclose the number. So, but in order to pass like an expert exam in general, you need to get like around 80%. If you get 80%, you have a good chance of passing the exam. So we don't disclose the exact number because it can differ, right? We have some forms that are easier than other forms. So a more difficult form could get like a lower pass score, while an easy form could get a higher. But in general, what we say to people, if you aim for 80%, you're in a good spot. Okay?